بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful.
الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا من سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد عبده ورسوله أما بعد. As students, I think not all of you, most of you are, perhaps you've undergone crash courses, perhaps before you started university. Certainly when you start your new job, inshallah, probably there'll be a crash course, a week course, very intensive to help you understand the work that you're about to embark on. And of course, the whole purpose of that crash course is that you will learn a lot of things in a very short time and then implement them, use them for your job. We have just gone through a very intensive crash course, all of us. A crash course in spirituality, a crash course in morality building, a crash course in building our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course, during this time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made sure that the circumstances within this very blessed month that has just passed us were just perfect for us to develop the taqwa for which this fasting in Ramadan was revealed and made fard upon us, by chaining the shaitan and of course by not eating or drinking or weakening our nafs. Nafs and shaitan are the two obstacles to lifting our taqwa and reaching the levels that we need to reach in order to fulfill the purpose of our existence, which is وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I didn't create insan nor jinn, but to worship me. And that means, the very broad sense of the word worship, is that we indulge ourselves, our lives, conduct our lives in a manner that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all times. As I've said before, you are now in a state of worship simply by sitting and listening, because you are acting in accordance with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and of course the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'm in a state of worship now because I'm just reminding you of our duties to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is what the purpose of this very blessed month was. And it was a crash course in building resistance to temptation from the shaitan. That shaitan is now released. He was very angry at the fact that he was chained up and therefore less able to influence us. Since Eid, we have been, all of us, without exception, we've been hearing that whispering of the shaitan in our ears. You've been a really great guy, woman, you can relax now. All those prayers, you can relax on those prayers. All those hours you are reading Quran, you can relax on them now. All those restrictions that you put on yourself, you can relax those restrictions now. That sadaqah that you were giving, you can relax on that. All actions that lead us towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that reduce that gap between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that whispering in our ears is saying, well, you can relax on those things now and allow yourself to drift back to that state you were before Ramadan. All of us, our state of taqwa has been raised. The question, of course, for us is, how do I reduce that whispering of the shaitan? How do I maintain those levels of taqwa that I had reached as a result of that increased spiritual and physical input in reaching toward the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Well, of course, we need to continue our prayers, we need to continue our Quran, etc. However, the Prophet ﷺ has given us a beautiful formula for helping us to maintain those levels of taqwa, so that we do not drift back and therefore increase that gap between us and our Maker. You see, the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba and those who have followed for centuries, fasting was never just a matter of doing it in the month of Ramadan. It never was. In the month of Ramadan, it is fard. Every single day is fard. However, it was very much a part of their daily lives. It was a lifestyle thing. Just as we have food and breakfast in the morning, or lunch, or dinner during the day, fasting was something they just did. And as we know, the Prophet ﷺ, every Monday and Thursday, he used to fast. The 3 middle days of each month, 14, 15 and 16, he would fast. 9th and 10th of Ashura, he would fast. The first 9 days of Dhul Hijjah, he would fast. And many other days like that. So it was very much a normal thing. For some reason, most of us, because I know many brothers and sisters, they do fast during the year, but for most of us, we seem to think that fasting is only for the month of Ramadan. Now, our mindset is saying, well, we can relax now until next Ramadan, so far as fasting is concerned. In order to, number one, bring back this very important sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, but also at the same time maintain those levels of taqwa that we have all achieved, if we were to implement this sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and of course I forgot to mention the very important 6 days of Shawwal, and I'm sure many of you are actually implementing that. At any 6 days during this month of Shawwal that we're going through, we've just gone through about a week of it, so we've got 3 weeks left. Any 6 days, having fasted these 6 days, the reward is as though we had fasted for the whole year. That's how rewarding it is. And I'm sure many of you, perhaps even today, are fasting, or other days of Shawwal. For those who haven't, who are not used to it, let me give you an idea of really how important this is. Not just from the religious point of view, but in terms of bringing back the sunnah and practicing the sunnah, but also from in terms of helping to maintain those levels of taqwa that we have, inshallah, all reached. What were we doing for those 29, 30 days that we were fasting? Not only were we controlling, of course, between break of dawn and sunset, any gas, liquid or solid that was entering our bodies, but also we were controlling what was entering our ears. We were uttering with our mouths, what we were seeing with our eyes, controlling our emotions, controlling our general demeanor, our behavior, to make sure that we do not undermine the fast in any way, so that we do not reduce the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we would normally get for the 17, 18 hours of fasting that we were doing. Now, when we have been doing this for 29, 30 days consecutive, a certain psychological impact occurs on our bodies. And there's a very powerful link that's been created within our minds that we're probably not even aware of. There's this very powerful link, psychologists may refer to as a conditioned reflex, that when we fast, we abstain from eating, drinking, smoking, etc. At the same time, now there's a link in our minds that we must also be controlling our ears, our mouths, our eyes, and general behavior. And we have to be praying, and we need to go to the mosque and read Quran and all the things that we were doing during the month of Ramadan, which we generally perhaps don't do or as much of outside. There is this very powerful link that has been created in our minds. And every time you fast, even outside of Ramadan, those brothers who fast and sisters who fast outside, who are fasting today or during this month of Shawwal, will know exactly what I'm talking about. That spirit of Ramadan will enter your body. You will feel as though you are in Ramadan. And you will have this natural urge to control your eyes, your ears, your mouth, and to pray, and to read Quran, and do all the other things that you were doing during the month of Ramadan when you were fasting. This very powerful link has been created. And that's why if we want to maintain those levels of taqwa, to fast regularly like this is immensely important and beneficial. That's the spiritual side. But of course, physically as well, for our own sake, in terms of our health, it is extremely important that we maintain the fasting element. We know generally that fasting is good for you, but we actually didn't know how good it was. Recently, last few months, there was a program. Dr. Michael Mosley, some of you may have heard of him. He's a non-Muslim, in fact he's an atheist, but he's done about 17 programs for the BBC on matters relating to health. One of those episodes that many of you might have seen was related to the impact of fasting on the human body, specifically on this whole hour, and he went from one research lab to another through the US and Europe and other places. Not from any religious point of view, and the researchers are non-Muslims, nothing to do with Islam at all, just the impact of fasting on the human body. And his research revealed some amazing results. I could give you an hour just on the health benefits that he discovered. But just very briefly, in fact it's on BBC iPlayer I'm sure, so you can just log on to BBC iPlayer and see that particular program, like Dr. Michael Mosley and fasting. But very briefly, his research showed from detoxification of the body, even up to delaying dementia, that is, signs of old age, losing your memory, etc. Fasting benefits all of these things. These are just a couple of things I've just mentioned. In fact, he was so impressed by the results using the very latest of knowledge and technology of the anatomy, etc., that the very next day he was on the BBC Breakfast program on television. And he was interviewed about this particular program, this episode that he'd just done. And he said, and these are pretty much his words, and you can see them on YouTube, that bearing in mind the enormous health benefits of fasting, I have decided to fast every Monday and Thursday, like the Prophet Muhammad. Now this guy is an atheist. He doesn't care about the religious implications, purely from a health perspective. And bearing in mind, and these are facts, that the Muslim community as a whole is the unhealthiest community, religious community in this entire country. That's unfortunately a fact which we've got from NHS surveys. We are the unhealthiest religious community from Muslims, Christians, Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, and Sikhs when they were surveyed. I think even from the health perspective, we should all put this very powerful sunnah into practice. If we cannot fast every Monday and Thursday, at least some Mondays and Thursdays. If we cannot fast all, let's try all of us to fast the 6 days of Shawwal. If we can't fast all the days, the first 9 days of Dhul Hijjah, at least some of them, and especially the Yom Arafah, which is the 9th of Dhul Hijjah. If we cannot fast every 3 middle days of each month, at least some of them. Let's see fasting as a very normal part of our lives, not as something specific to the month of Ramadan. Let's de-link, let's remove this link that we have in our minds that I will only fast in the month of Ramadan. Yes, in the month of Ramadan it is fard, every single day is fard. But let us bring this very powerful sunnah back into our lives. And we will see that we are able, inshallah, to maintain through this very hard work. Having fasted 18, 19 hours was not easy. We all felt it. And the next few years is going to be even tougher because it's going to be longer. It's going to be another 8 years before iftar will be about 8 o'clock in April. So let's get used to fasting. Let's make this very much a part of our weekly, monthly life. Let's not see it as something specific to the month of Ramadan. On a slightly different note, of course, the situation in Egypt is in all of our minds. Very, very tragic indeed. And of course, the situation in Syria. One thing that we need to understand is a little bit of background and understand what's happening in case we don't know. Many of us are, inshallah, politicians naturally, and we understand politics as to what's going on. But being probably more senior than certainly most of you, we need to understand something. The West has its agenda. Islam and we Muslims have our agenda, and the secular liberals have their agenda. Each one has their agenda. We want to implement, we would like to live according to Allah's laws. All of us, as Muslims, we should want to live in accordance with Allah's laws, with Quran and Sunnah. Of course, so far as the West is concerned, yes, it would like to see democracy in the world, but what they miss out is they would like to see secular liberal democracy. In other words, the kind of democracy that we have in the West where there's a relaxation on all the sexual morality, fornication, adultery, homosexuality, alcohol, gambling and pornography, and all of these things. There's a relaxed attitude towards all of these things. That's the kind of democracy they would like to see, also in the Muslim world as well. In other words, an image of the West itself. Of course, that goes against our interests, because clearly that is not what we would like to see. We would like to implement Quran and Sunnah, where there's a lot of overlap between, democratic Western values and Islamic values, but there are very clear areas of differences. And of course, they will always have their individuals within our societies. I mean, for decades now, we've been run by the military. The military is generally secular. And those who are of secular liberal mentality, they will be getting instructions and backing, financial and otherwise, from the West. Why? Because the West would like to use them in order to bring about a secular liberal environment. In fact, we could say this with some surety. I remember very clearly, most of you are too young, or probably weren't even born, about 22, 23 years ago. I remember in, was it 1990, 91, when with the Algerian situation, where you had FIS, the Islamic Front, that had Salvation Front, that won the elections in Algeria, the provincial elections, which were in accordance with French election rules, etc. And so they were very, very open, very transparent, very fair. The Islamic Party under Professor Abbas Madani, they won overwhelmingly, something like 80% of the vote. Now the French, of course, have a huge influence on Algeria because of the fact it was a colonial power before. And the socialists have been in power ever since. Up to that time, certainly, maybe some would say even now. The presidential election was cancelled, which was supposed to come next. And FIS was outlawed. Jacques Chirac, who was the French president at the time, was asked the following day, when the Islamic Party, which overwhelmingly won, hands down, totally fair. Their leaders were imprisoned, the party was banned. He was asked, why have you done this? The whole election process was done according to French rules and French law. It was totally transparent, totally fair. Why have you done this? And you have to take your hat off to the frankness of these leaders. And I'm virtually quoting verbatim what he said on the BBC and of course on the world stage when he was asked. He said, we know that Islam is coming to Algeria, but we feel it is our duty to delay that time as much as possible. These were his exact words. That exposes the Western mentality. This is their attitude towards Islam and towards Muslim countries. These were his exact words, and they are a reflection of how the West generally is going to think about Islam in Muslim countries. So we should not be in the least bit surprised about what is happening in Egypt or in the other countries that will go down this road of trying to implement Islam, Quran and Sunnah within those countries. They will find every excuse under the sun to try and undermine the party, etc. So the slaughter is very tragic, and Allah give those shuhada Jannah Firdaus. But it's something that we need to understand, that this is where the West is coming from. This is why we have to be stronger, understand what the issues are and how we as Muslims are going to deal with those issues. We've got to be smarter. If you do a SWOT analysis like business people do for businesses and examine our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, we need to be aware of those threats from within and from without. They are going to be there, but we've got to be smarter. And that means that we need to make sure we know how, number one, we know the rules of the game. When you enter politics, you've got to know the rules of the game. Number two, we've got to be extremely good at playing the game. Because if you don't know the rules of the game, don't enter it. If you're not extremely good in terms of playing the game, don't enter it. Because it's nasty and it is very difficult. The threats are enormous. And you've got to be strong enough to withstand the threats. So let us, especially as Muslims, as inshallah, as intellectuals, as the higher echelons of our societies, university graduates, postgraduates, etc., we need to ask ourselves, what role do I play, bearing in mind, I would like to see Islamic governments, but also very progressive Islamic governments where the people are, of course, prosperous. This is the main thing for the people, is that they are able to pay their bills. They are able to live with dignity and with security. Dignity and security. So financial security and physical security, these are the two main things for an average person in the street. How do we bring that about? Those of us who are economists, we need to specialize in these areas, knowledge, but also get the physical, actual expertise in the very latest of economic models and social models and every other models, so that we are able, number one, we know the rules of the game, and we are excellent players so that we win the game. That is what, to some extent, the Turks have been doing. In Turkey, under Erdogan, in spite of the fact that he understands the rules of the game and he's sent out the right signals to the West, look, we're still secular, don't worry about it, and of course, in reality, he's been trying to implement an Islamic program. In spite of all that, we see, and even, I understand, gay pride marches were allowed. I mean, you know, it is something that we cannot imagine in a Muslim country. But at the same time, the West is still trying to undermine the actual, because the West knows exactly what's going on through this park episode, etc. So we need to understand the rules of the game. We need to make sure we are excellent players in the game, better than everybody else, because the threats to what we want are so enormous, and the West will put its full intellectual and political and economic muscle behind stopping any change from a secular liberal environment towards an Islamic environment. Let us make sure that we understand what is going on and we play our role. Whatever we are studying, let's be masters of that and let us study how we are going to implement that within an Islamic government that produces those two very important factors that the average person in the street wants, that is financial security and physical security as well. الحمد لله إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب اللهم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. Ya Allah, all actions and ibadah we have done, including the fasting and the Quran and the prayers, Ya Allah, we have done only for you. Ya Allah, accept them from us. Ya Allah, those sins that we have committed, Ya Allah, forgive us those sins. Ya Allah, our brothers and sisters and friends and relations who have died, give them Jannatul Firdaus. Ya Allah, those of our friends and brothers and sisters and parents who have died, give them Jannatul Firdaus. And those who are sick, give them a speedy recovery. Ya Allah, those who are studying, give them success in their studies and help them to use that knowledge for the benefit of the Ummah. Ya Allah, those who are seeking suitable marriage partners, help make that search easy for them and help them to find partners who will make them happy but also will bring them closer to you. Ya Allah, brothers and sisters around the world who are fighting the forces of evil to bring about your laws in their countries, Ya Allah, help them to be successful against those forces of evil from within and from outside. And especially our brothers and sisters in Egypt now and also in Syria, give them the help in order for them to remove the obstacles so they are able to implement your laws in their land. Inna Allah ya'muru bil 'adli wal ihsan wa ita'i dhil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha'i wal munkari wal baghi ya'idukum la'allakum tadhakkarun wa dhikrullahi akbar wallahu ya'lamu ma tasna'un wa aqimis salat.